Open Minds Media.
Indiana County 911. My brother's gone. Can you be a little more specific, sir? He took my brother. Who took him? I don't know who took him. I don't know what. Sir, take time. Take a breath. Explain to me what happened.
And I looked out and there was this big red blinking UFO.
I can just say this. Something's going on in the woods. Something's going on.
They're not dogs, they're not coyotes. What could it be, right?
I had an encounter with a skunk ape, and it completely altered the course of my life.
I found a skull. Are you guys going to want to come film this?
Put him out.
I just see it.
Sightings of a UFO hovering over a barn.
Millie woke up from a dream, and when I went into the bedroom, she said, "There's a monster on the wall."
They saw that the creature had run through a barbed wire fence. They were able to obtain hairs. They sent the hairs to their lab, and it came back as an unknown creature.
Bizarre Encounters with Shayn Orin.
What is up, guys, and welcome back to the most bizarre show on the internet. I am the one that they call OmmenCounterreports.
And I'm Orin.
The big bad boo daddy.
Big bad boo daddy. We're still rolling with that for a while.
Dude, if you don't throw it in, I'm just going to throw it in on every episode. Because, I mean, that's just your official nickname now. You're the big bad boo daddy.
Hey, we finally found one that stuck. But, in other news, I hear we have some exciting updates for the OMM community.
So, some exciting updates for that. Ryley, who is actually on an episode of Bizarre Encounters a very long time ago when the show first started. He was a friend that I started talking to as soon as I started the podcast. We met at Bigfoot and Brews, and he's been talking for going on 2-3 years now about starting up his own podcast. Finally decided to start getting it going. Super happy for him, so I let him join in on our little Open Minds Media family here. So his first 2 episodes, of course, are me, and then he has Orin on. And yeah, I just wanted to give him a big shout out because I know he listens to this show. And again, just say welcome to the family. And to all the listeners out there, go and check out Midwest Mythos. And I will include the link down in the check it out part of the show description. So if you guys want to go and listen to his show, you guys can go and listen to it. But I guess, Orin, I can throw it to you for a second if you want to, tell them a little bit about how it went and how you feel about the show.
Yeah, so I guess, Shayn, your episode kind of dropped a couple days ago at time of recording here. I just recorded with Ryley 2 days ago. So that has not dropped yet. Should drop sometime next week, I believe. Super cool guy. This is the first time I've ever actually met him kind of face-to-face, talked to him in person. Kind of feel like I know him just from him being a friend of the show and whatnot. But no, super cool guy. Wish him all the best of luck with his show. I think he's kind of going to hit the ground running. So yeah, definitely check that out and show him some love, you guys.
And there will be also some future projects probably coming from all 3 of us. He might start popping onto some episodes of Bizarre Inquiries once in a while, or yeah, we'll figure something out. Maybe we'll do like a every other month like group hangout with all 3 of us or something. But we'll kind of coordinate something where we can kind of get the whole Open Minds Media family all in one place. And kind of speaking about that, Open Minds Media family all in one place, Small Town Monster Fest, guys. We will be there. That's going to be happening June 29th, 2024, of course. And we will be vending. It's going to be downtown Canton, Ohio at the Tree by Hilton. Kids 12 and under are free, but all the adults, of course, will make sure you have to grab your tickets, mark your calendars, make sure you guys come out to that because it's going to be me, it's going to be Orin, it's going to be Ryley. He's actually going to be helping me vend at the table for a little bit, and it's going to be Jenny, if anybody remembers, one of the older hosts for Bizarre Encounters. And then Gabby, the one who comes with me, my girl, to every convention. She's going to be there. My daughter's going to be there, who does all the cryptid art and stuff. We're going to have the full team. It's going to be a lot of fun. And hopefully afterwards, we'll have some kind of hangout because I know that it's kind of hard sometimes when we're vending to be able to just kind of walk away and talk and hang out with all of you guys. So there'll be some form of an after party for everybody that wants to come and hang out. But if anybody is deciding that they want to come out to that, let us know that you guys are coming out because we'd love to know you by face and by name.
And jumping into the normal stuff, don't forget to follow Bizarre Encounters and Open Minds Media on Instagram and Facebook, and check out video content on YouTube, TikTok, and then also the Discord. Check that out and submit your own bizarre inquiries for the Patreon exclusive mini show, Bizarre Inquiries.
And if anybody has an encounter to report, you guys can report those to ommencounterreports at outlook.com. No matter how big, no matter how small they are, I want to hear about them. Orin wants to hear about them. We all want to hear about them. And we want to put an episode together where we discuss some of your guys' experiences. So you guys can either, one, type them out and we can read them on the show, or two, if you guys want to record yourselves and then you guys can email it to us, that's definitely a good option too. And also, if you're just somebody that wants to be able to have somebody to talk to about your experiences, but you don't want it anywhere on the internet, you don't want anybody talking about it on a show, that's totally okay too. We are here to listen to you and not look at you like you're crazy. And even if you're relatively close to one of us, we may be able to come out and investigate it. But if you, again, want to report those encounters, there's a submission form on the link tree that says report those encounters, or report your encounters. And you guys can also send them to ommencounterreports at outlook.com. And if you guys want to support the show, best way of doing so is through the Patreon. Over there, I recently updated the tiers a couple weeks ago because we switched over from using Riverside to Zoom again, so I'm not able to offer the lives, but there's a lot of new benefits for you guys to check out, even for the members who are still currently members. Make sure you guys go and check your tier benefits now. And there is also a $3 tier and a $5 tier free trial for 7 days, so if anybody wants to take advantage of that, you guys can always do that too. And of course, you guys can also support the show through the OMM merch store. Over there, I have designs for this show, for Inquiries of Our Reality, for Bizarre Inquiries, and for a bunch of other random designs that kind of have to do with stuff in the community, paranormal, UFOs, Sasquatch, all that really cool stuff. I recently posted the Follow the Tracks one on the Instagram page if anybody wants to see what that one looks like. And actually, a previous guest of Inquiries of Our Reality bought the Watch the Skies one, so I actually posted that too. So if anybody kind of wants to see what they look like being worn, you guys can always go and check that out on the social media pages. And I am still running the promo for Cryptid 10 if you guys want to get 10% off. And also, if you guys are thinking about joining the Patreon and picking up some merch, go and join the Patreon, and over there you'll get exclusive tiers or exclusive promo codes depending on which tier you pick. And of course, you can go and use those on the merch store. And if anybody is interested in podcast production services or audiobook production services, you guys can hit me up through Open Minds Media, whether you're somebody who's been doing it for a while or you're somebody that's just starting off. If you need a little bit of help, I'm here to help you out. And for all the authors out there, if you want to have an audiobook be created, I would absolutely love to do that. So you guys can hit me up, email me, get a hold of me on social media. It doesn't matter. Whatever you want to do, just look up Open Minds Media and contact me through there.
And a big shout out and thank you to our sponsors, as always. Rick and Hans, our buddies with IKNOWSQUATCH. Check them out for all your squatchy gear needs. And Joe at Cryptoteeology. He's killing it, as always, with your wearable cryptid favorite.
Still running with it, man, but you don't want to say the Boo Daddy in the beginning, man. I don't get it.
Well, the Boo Daddy loves wearable cryptid favorites.
Yes, he does. And you guys can also check out Snarly Yow for a fantastic smoky cedar with a hint of mint, beard oil, beard balm, beard soap, and body wash. Dave is one of the best people out in the community, and he does a lot more than just create natural body products. Orin, why don't you tell him what else he does out there?
That's right. He does a lot of events in kind of the West Virginia area. You've heard us talk about him time and time again. We're going to be hanging out with him at Cryptid Halloween 3 coming up in October. We will be speaking / emceeing along with possibly some other friends of the show. So definitely check that out. Definitely Dave, super cool guy. Show him some love too.
And going into the affiliate links, if anybody hasn't heard anything about the newest sponsor of the show, Oregon-ite, you guys can always go and check out the fantastic pieces he creates. They're all intended to basically take in negative energy and put out positive energy. And he creates them in a bunch of different forms and a bunch of different fashions, makes them all himself by hand. They're absolutely beautiful. And if you guys want to use the promo code or want to use our affiliate link, we would greatly appreciate it. And if you guys want an extra 10% off, you guys can use code OMM at checkout. And to all the paranormal investigators out there, if you guys haven't already checked out this Chattergeist, I don't know what you're doing. It is one of the best paranormal investigating devices out there. Barry is a really, really good guy. He created this thing, programmed it, developed it all himself. Also runs the Instagram page. So if any of you guys have any technical questions about it whatsoever, you guys can hit him up. And he does this thing where, he doesn't want to have to keep upgrading the actual thing where you guys have to buy a new model every year. So the intention is that he keeps making patches for the same device. So if anybody's worried about buying one and the next year they'll make a new one, that's not the case. He just wants to keep developing on the single one that he's already created. So it won't go out of date anytime soon. And he's always creating new patches and new modifications and new pieces for it. A bunch of really cool stuff on the way he's been announcing. So if you guys want to pick one of those up, you guys can use our affiliate link for 10% off. And it is also in pounds because he is from the UK, but don't think that you can't order one because that's not the case. Shipping isn't too crazy expensive either. It will convert over to US currency, whatever country you're in, through PayPal.
And all of this shit we've mentioned is in the link tree in the show description.
And hopping into today's show. So we've been kind of doing this thing where, we were doing a lot of interviews at first, but now we're kind of going back and forth for the most part and just kind of doing research. We've had some guests in the mix, but we're kind of looking into more obscure stuff. And last week I did the show talking about the Lake Titus monster. I don't know if I'm saying the name of that lake right. I'm still fucked up after even saying it 30 times on the episode. But today, we're going to be bringing it into more possibly aquatic creatures with Orin's research. So, Orin, without further ado, why don't you let them know what we're talking about today?
All right, y'all. So tonight we are going to be talking about the Mokele-Mbembe and other living dinosaurs. So unless you got anything else, I'll just jump right in.
Oh, I'm excited. You can just jump right in, man.
All right. So the Mokele-Mbembe is allegedly a large sauropod-like creature that resides in the Congo River basin of Central Africa.
Allegedly. What's that from? I hear that in my head every single time I hear the word allegedly.
I can't remember. It's definitely from something, though. But
we got a listener out there that's just yelling, it's from this, and I'm just like, allegedly.
Well, hey, shoot us a message. But anyway, so descriptions of the Mokele-Mbembe kind of vary widely. And most of the accounts describe it as like an actual physical living creature. But there are some accounts that describe it almost more like a spirit entity. But it's said to be kind of brownish gray in color and have smooth skin, a long neck, and a long muscular tail. And this is kind of interesting. It's also said to have either a single large tooth or a horn. And remember that. We'll be talking about that again later. It's said to be roughly the size of an elephant, and it's often spotted in rivers and swamps. It's allegedly also a herbivore, but it has also been known to attack and kill natives on the river while they're canoeing.
That sucks. I wanted to ride it. It sounded like it'd be a pretty fun thing to ride.
Do it at your own risk, it sounds like. But
I want to ride an aquatic elephant. That sounds amazing.
Kind of jumping into some of the sightings and history of this creature. So in 1913, a German captain named Ludwig von Stein, which is like the most German-sounding name I've ever heard.
Ludwig von Stein.
Yeah. So he made the first published report of Mokele-Mbembe. And he was conducting a survey of a German colony that was located in what is now Cameroon. And while he was there, he heard tales about this creature from the locals, and he included it in his reports. But it's kind of been speculated that this von Stein guy didn't really consider the creature to be like a real living animal, but kind of just like a figment of legend or folklore of the area. So after this was published, tales of the creature kind of continued to grow in popularity, and it was especially popular with cryptozoologists and young Earth creationists. And throughout the years, several expeditions were undertaken to try to find this creature, photograph it, prove its existence.
What's a young Earth creationist? Just asking offhand, because I don't think I have that word in my vocabulary.
So it's kind of the idea in like basically mostly Christian circles that, the Earth is not millions or billions of years old. A lot of Christians think the Earth is 6,000 to 10,000 years old.
Oh,
and
I didn't know there was a name for that.
Either like the Earth was created to appear to be older than it is, or like through the flood and other things, it appears older than it is. And a lot of these people think if they can find this quote unquote living dinosaur, they can kind of prove that the Earth is not millions upon millions of years old and possibly thousands of years. So that's why this thing's been popular in like the Christian conservative, creationist type circles.
Isn't that semi-contradicting too, though? Because if you're one of the people that would be that kind of have those views, aren't those typically the people that don't really believe in dinosaurs in the first place and think that their bones were just kind of buried to throw people off or something like that?
I think that's kind of more the extreme end of the spectrum, like the dinosaurs didn't exist or the devil planted the bones or whatever. But Yeah. I don't know. I think this is slightly more hinged than those people are.
But I mean, even so, I don't understand how it would necessarily prove their theory because, I mean, obviously, like a dinosaur that exists as the size of an elephant probably, was a lot bigger at one point. So, I mean, like there would have been some type of like process of it getting down to like a smaller point, possibly to live or something. But I don't feel like that would necessarily prove anything to anyone on that viewpoint.
Well, they beg to differ, but we might kind of get into some of those kind of thoughts when we kind of wrap things up. So we'll keep that one on the back burner.
Yeah, so I'll stop intruding into it. So we don't go too far into that one.
You're good. So kind of jumping into some of these expeditions. In the early 80s, there was a biologist/cryptozoologist named Roy Mackal, and he organized multiple expeditions. And I was not familiar with this gentleman prior to knowing about the Mokele-Mbembe. Have you ever heard of him?
I've heard this name before a long time ago, but honestly, it was talking about Mokele-Mbembe. So I've only heard the name associated with that, to be honest with you.
Yeah, so I mean, it seems like kind of in the cryptozoology circle, he should be a little more renowned than he is. So I'm going to talk about his background a little bit here. So he was born on August 1st, 1925 in Milwaukee, Wisconsin, and he served in World War II. And after the war, he attended the University of Chicago, and he got an undergraduate degree in biology and a PhD in zoology. So this guy is not some, not a dumbass podcaster, keyboard warrior. This is an educated guy.
I like how you threw in like us.
Yeah. So he's widely considered to be one of the forefathers of cryptozoology. And he was one of the founding members of the International Society for Cryptozoology. And I had never heard of this either.
I want to be a member. That sounds fun. I want to do that.
Yeah, this was an organization that was created in 1982, and their goal was kind of to bring more credibility to the field of cryptozoology. But the organization ultimately folded in like the early 2000s, mostly due to lack of funding and because a lot of the prominent members ended up dying off and there's nobody to replace them.
Dude, if it would have lasted another 15 years past that, cryptozoology would have blown back up again and that thing would have been fully taken over and flourishing, man. That's sad.
Yeah, they were a little ahead of their time.
Maybe we need to bring it back. We can be the people that bring back the International Society for Cryptozoology. We can do
2.0.
it. 2.0, yes. We'll call it 2.0.
So jumping back in, Roy Mackal, his interest in cryptozoology kind of started in the 60s when he was investigating the Loch Ness Monster. And he even served as the chief scientist for the Loch Ness Phenomena Investigation Bureau, which just proves there's all sorts of cool clubs back in the day that we don't have anymore.
LNPIB. I want to be a member of the LNPIB.
Yeah, they need a snappier acronym. But
yeah, that one's kind of hard to say no matter how many times you say it.
Yeah. So this group, they were ultimately unable to prove the existence, of Nessie. Go figure. But Mackal claimed that he had his own sighting of the creature in 1970. And after that, he was convinced of the reality of the creature. And then in 1976, he wrote a book about his investigation. And it was titled just The Monster of Loch Ness, quick and to the point. And in the book, he proposed that the creature or creatures was possibly a Zeglodon, I believe is how it's pronounced, which is a species of serpentine whales that believed to have gone extinct millions of years ago.
I like the different theories with Nessie because I'm one of those people that I don't know for sure, but I don't think Nessie is as people describe it. I definitely think it's something else. One of the best theories that I've heard is the whole thing about it being a giant salamander.
Put a pin in that. We're coming back to it.
Well, I'm just saying I appreciate the fact that this guy had a different theory other than the typical plesiosaur concept. I have respect for that. That's what I'm throwing out here.
Yeah. So remember that. We're going to circle back around. So after concluding his research of the Loch Ness Monster, Mackal kind of shifted his attention to the Mokele-Mbembe. And in 1980 and again in 1981, Mackal and an explorer named Henry Powell kind of started going on expeditions to the Congo. And they had a whole team that went with them. And one of the team members was a Congolese biologist named Marcelin Agnagna. I believe is how it would be pronounced.
Congolese sounds really weird. That sounds like a word that shouldn't be a word.
There's a couple in that sentence that I had to like run through in my head before we recorded. But anyway, remember that name because he's going to come back up again later. So, spoiler alert, these expeditions were unable to discover proof of the Mokele-Mbembe, but they did interview a bunch of natives about the creature. And a lot of these firsthand accounts describe the creature as resembling a long-necked sauropod dinosaur-looking creature. So Mackle attempted to raise funding for a third expedition, but he was never able to do so. But in 1987, he wrote another book, this one about the Mokele-Mbembe expeditions. And this one was titled A Living Dinosaur? ? In Search of Mokele-Mbembe.
Getting more creative with the titles, I see.
Yeah, he's branching out. And in that book, he stated, and I quote, "I admit that my own views are tinged with some romanticism, but certainly not to the extent that I would endure extreme hardship, even risk my life, to pursue a dream with no basis in reality." So this guy, obviously, he thought there was something to this. This was not just a for shits and giggles, endeavor that he undertook. He really thought he could find this thing. And, like he said, he thought he saw the Loch Ness Monster. That was all the proof he needed. Then he was on to something else, and he was just trying to find this thing.
Dude, we talk about the vastness of the forest in North America and what could possibly exist within that. Now, just like imagine the jungle, how hard it is to move through that in general to get anywhere deep in it whatsoever. And think about how many pockets of people they found in rainforest that have had no contact with outside civilizations and stuff. And they only stumbled upon them on accident because of starting to tear down parts of the rainforest and stuff. Like these giant jungles, man, that's a whole other level of what could exist in there. Like this animals that we're still discovering currently, 99% of them come from they all come from a split between the ocean and deep Congo/rainforest jungles. So, I mean, that says something.
And apparently this village, this area where this thing supposedly lives is almost impossible to reach. Like just getting there is a nightmare. Like they tried to do expeditions multiple times that they couldn't even get to the area because it's just so uninhabited. There's no good way to get there. So yeah, exactly. You're dead on with that.
Like the jungles are the forest is one thing, but the jungles though,
yeah.
Not even on top of that, just even the little stuff you got to worry about because it's you get bit by the wrong type of mosquito or a little bug and you're dead in the middle of the jungle and there's no way to make it back out of that. Half its places they probably can't even get helicopters deep enough into it because you wouldn't be able to land anywhere. You wouldn't be able to do anything. You'd run out of fuel before you could make the trip there and come back.
Absolutely.
The vastness of the jungle is almost hard to comprehend,
especially for us. But
yeah,
yeah. So anyway, kind of rounding out Roy Mackle. So these investigations and expeditions, a lot of people have kind of criticized them for not really following scientific procedures and whatnot. So the validity, of them has kind of been questioned, but they did kind of popularize the modern concept of this creature. And Roy Mackle died on September 14th, 2013 at the age of 88. So that's a little bit about Roy Mackle and his expeditions and his contributions to cryptozoology.
I mean, even if he didn't discover it, we're always just talking about the concept of keeping stories alive. Every time I've heard about this, his name has been associated with it.
Yeah.
So it's
he's like the central figure in this cryptid tale,
I mean, even if he didn't discover it, he's the only reason that probably people actually know what it is now. So, I mean, at the minimum, at least he can say that part of his legend was keeping this legend alive and keeping it pushing into a new generation of cryptozoologists. Because again, if he didn't dig into it, cryptozoology, I feel didn't really start popularizing until around the time that he passed away, because it seemed like it kind of had a wave down in the early 2000s, then came back up, So he was at that fine point where it could have been lost if he didn't do his research,
Yeah, for sure. But after his expeditions, there kind of have been some more people that looked into this legend. So later in the 80s, this Marcelin Agnagna, which we talked about was the biologist from the Powell-Mackle expeditions, he claimed to actually capture footage of the Mokele-Mbembe. But in typical cryptozoological fashion, the film failed to develop properly. So, wah, wah.
Wah, wah, wah.
But this is kind of a controversial account anyway, because this guy Agnagna was supposedly the only witness to this encounter, and kind of the details of his story have changed throughout the years. So later in the 80s and the late 80s and early 90s, a Scottish explorer named Billy Gibbons, and not the one from ZZ Top.
Dang it,
Billy
I thought it
Gibbons.
was.
Yeah, sharp-dressed dinosaurs. But anyway, he led multiple expeditions to the Congo to try to find this creature. But he was, again, one of these like young Earth creationists, and he's really been criticized for failing to follow even like basic scientific principles in his search. So basically, he was just this guy romping around in the jungle looking for a dinosaur.
That's what I just imagined, just him walking around the jungle, just, Dino, where are you?
Got his Bible under one arm and
machete in the other,
looking for dinosaurs. Yep. But anyway, moving on. In 1993, a journalist named Roy Nugent published a book titled "Drums Along the Congo on the Trail of Mokele-Mbembe, the Last Living Dinosaur," which is a mouthful.
Yeah.
What Roy Mackle lacked in his book naming, this guy's making up for. He's got like 3 titles in his one title of his book.
Well, if you forget one title, at least there's 2 other ones you can remember.
Yeah, there you go. So anyway, in this book, there is a photograph that this guy claims to be of the creature, but it's been analyzed, and a lot of people think that it is most likely just a floating log. So,
especially out in the jungle, man, like those trees get windy and weird. So, I mean, I could totally see it, you know?
Yeah, and it could just be a real fucking big log. Who knows?
I mean, tree on the edge, you know, there's a heavy rain where everything starts rushing in. Some of the trees get knocked over. And again, all these jungle trees are kind of funky, weird shaped anyways. So, I mean, I could definitely see one kind of bending up and making kind of that neck shape.
Dinosaur tree.
Dinosaur tree, yeah, exactly. Some trees are fucking dinosaurs, man.
Yeah, that's true. So kind of rounding out some theories and miscellaneous thoughts and whatnot. So as we kind of noted in the intro, people have noted that it's kind of difficult to differentiate between these tales of the Mokele-Mbembe being like a metaphysical and a physical creature. So it's very kind of esoteric and spiritual how a lot of these natives describe the creature. But many mainstream scientists believe that if there is any basis to this creature, it's most likely inspired by the black rhinoceros. And this is interesting because, as we mentioned also in the intro, the Mokele-Mbembe is said to have a large tooth or a horn, which could be, you know, a misidentified or, you know, like we talked about, game of telephone, issues of language, black rhinoceros. So
I'm assuming that, well, maybe, at least hippos, they do this thing where they like jump off the bottom of the water and stuff. I wonder if like black rhinoceroses, if they would maybe do something where like when they're going through the water rather than swimming, because they're kind of a big heavy animal, they kind of just let themselves sink and kind of just jump up through the water until they get to the other side. So that might be what some of the sightings were, is just this thing jumping across the bottom of the water, trying to keep its head up out of the water, and people just seeing it peek out of the water for a minute, you know?
Yeah. No, I'm not sure about that. I didn't run across anything that specific, but I did think this was kind of cool. So in 2001, a BBC film crew was making a documentary, and they showed a tribe of natives pictures of like various animals. And most of the natives identified the Mokele-Mbembe as a rhinoceros. Like they showed them pictures and said, yeah, this is it. And it was a rhinoceros. But what's interesting about that is nowadays rhinoceroses are really uncommon in the Congo River Basin.
So it's a cryptid on its own.
Yeah, exactly. So some people have speculated that either, you know, generations ago, people saw these rhinoceroses and the legends were kind of based off of that. And again, game of telephone, issues of language, or that there are still small pockets of these things hidden deep in the jungle, going back to your earlier point. And actually some of the natives even specified that the creature was a real living creature, but it died, you know, several years before the interview. So that kind of goes back to this rhinoceros theory.
I mean, like I said, either way, if it's some kind of aquatic sea monster or it's a black rhinoceros, it's still cryptid both ways. I mean, you're still making a massive discovery if you find either.
Yeah. So kind of rounding this out, in addition to the books and television shows we've talked about, there is a movie that is based off of the Mokele-Mbembe legend. and it is called Baby, Secret of the Lost Legend. It was released in 1985, and it has a 12% rating on Rotten Tomatoes. So there is that.
I still want to watch it, not going to lie, because I don't trust the general public's opinions.
Well, you can watch it and report back to me and let me know how it is.
I hope it's extremely cheesy, because I would dig that.
I think it is, just from the little bit I was reading. But
I hope there's a part where there's an attack scene, and it's like that super 80s thing where it like bites somebody in the arm, and it's just straight red like paint flying out of them. They're just like,
I think that's exactly what it is.
That'd be dope. I think
you're
watch that.
on the right track.
I love 80s horror.
Do you have any thoughts, theories, anything before we kind of shift gears a little bit here?
I mean, honestly, like I was saying, if I had to guess at least what this thing was, as much as I like to take in the consideration of there being creatures that shouldn't theoretically exist, again, it's a cryptid all on its own, but I feel like the black rhinoceros theory is probably what it is and the way to go with it, and it was just misidentified.
Yeah, I think kind of like how we ended up the notes, this idea that there were these creatures, these rhinoceroses back in the jungle in previous generations, and the tail just kind of got spun, and that's what these people are talking about. I think, like you said, that is probably most likely at this point.
Because rhinoceroses, that's typically an African animal, right? If I'm not mistaken.
I think so. I don't claim to be a zoologist like Mr. Roy Mackle.
So theoretically speaking, even if the natives are creating legends about this, if it's like generally known about rhinoceroses in Africa, and then you have these tribes, these groups of people in the Congo they have no communication with the outside world, and they have no idea what the hell a rhinoceros is. I mean, they could completely start making up some of these stories about it, and then with future generations actually figuring out what a rhinoceros is, and then maybe not putting the two together, it could have started out where somebody saw it, they started creating stories about it, and then later on they were like, all right, yeah, that's a rhinoceros, and then they just kind of kept the legend and the black rhinoceros thing separate, even though, again, it was just a misidentification of the two, because they didn't have anything, like we talk about all the time, they didn't have anything to relate it to or call it yet, so they were just like, that's that big thing that's in the water half the time, you know? Like,
yeah, it's one of those gray areas where kind of fact and folklore kind of come together, you know?
That's my best theory on it. We can hop on to the next one if you want, but yeah, I'm going to assume it's a black rhinoceros.
Yep. Yeah, I think we're kind of good on that one. So, shifting gears a little bit, I never really intended to do a Loch Ness Monster episode or anything like that, because kind of like with Mothman, what are we going to say about Loch Ness that hasn't been said a million times? But
see, Loch Ness is one of those things that it's like it's like one of the OGs for cryptozoology, to the point where like everybody just is bored of talking about it unless there's some kind of new weird thing that comes out about it, you know?
Yeah, and so, but we're talking about living dinosaurs. Roy Mackle had a lot of experience with Loch Ness Monster, so I felt like we at least need to talk about it a little bit. Granted, we did talk about it recently on Bizarre Inquiries, so we're probably going to retread a little bit of that, but this is going to be a very shallow dive, no pun intended, into Loch Ness. This is by no means exhaustive, but we're just going to kind of throw some ideas and thoughts and theories out. So, kind of getting started, reports of strange creatures in Loch Ness date back to at least the year 565 AD, when an Irish monk named Saint Columba allegedly saw what he called a water beast in the lake. But reports of the creature kind of began to skyrocket in 1933 when they built a new highway alongside the loch. So the theory is, these things could have been in the lake forever, but people didn't really see them that much until this road was built and people were driving by it every day and seeing this thing pop out of the water.
I could see that. I could definitely see that. And I mean, it still has to do with the whole idea too of like stirring up the land, like we always talk about.
Yeah, absolutely.
So, I mean, assumably, if this thing's living in water and they're doing massive construction next to the water, it might kind of stir some stuff up, because the land itself more than likely probably has some vibrational frequencies going through it, stirring up stuff in the water. And again, remember that sound frequency and stuff travels differently through water. So,
no, that's a great point. But kind of jumping back in, moving on. Everybody knows the popular depiction of Nessie is, again, kind of a long neck plesiosaur type dinosaur. But going back to our buddy Roy Mackle, so he started off with his theory about the Loch Ness Monster being like a serpentine whale. Well, later in his career, he kind of came to the realization, conclusion, theory, what have you, that the creature could have been some sort of large amphibian resembling a salamander or a newt. And this is kind of what we were talking about in Bizarre Inquiries and what we touched on earlier. So, Shayn, I don't know how deep you want to dive, again, no pun intended, into this, but the floor is yours if you want to add anything.
Well, do you dive any more into the whole salamander theory within your notes? Because I don't want to double over anything.
The only other thing I've got about the salamander, and I'll just throw these in real quick and then I'll let you cook, but the salamander amphibian theory is kind of supported by the fact that theoretically an amphibian would be better suited to the cold waters of Loch Ness than a reptile dinosaur type creature would. And since amphibians breathe by absorbing oxygen through their skin, again, theoretically, they would not have to come up to the surface as often. And there was an encounter from 1880 when a diver named Duncan MacDonald, which is the most Scottish name I've ever heard. We had the most German name and the most Scottish name I've ever heard all in one episode.
Memorable names, man.
But anyway, he was searching for a shipwreck on the bottom of the loch, and he saw what he described as, quote, an amphibian of giant stature. So that's all I got on the amphibian front.
So I'll just throw in a couple additional details. Mainstream science basically suggests this theory that there's a giant salamander that lives in every continent, but there's not one for over in that area. So that's kind of why they said that there theoretically should be one, but there's not one. So they feel like there may have been one that went extinct or that we're just not fully aware of. And also throwing into the amphibian theory, when amphibians die, their skin, obviously, like you mentioned, is a bit different than other animal skin. So they kind of just turn into a giant, like, gooey glob. So even if people wanted to throw in the whole theory about like not finding a Loch Ness monster body, I mean, there could be breeding populations theoretically of these giant salamanders, and when they die, they just turn into a glob.
Mush.
Yeah, so you wouldn't be able to differentiate them after they die anyways. And also, they usually kind of stay still for a long time, and they'll kind of just sit in one spot for an extremely long time. So going into the whole thing where people would use like sonar and everything trying to find the Loch Ness monster, you know, even if there was a bunch of things on the water, if they weren't moving, then you wouldn't catch them. And they also are known to like hide in like little caves and little stuff they can find underwater. So, I mean, there's a lot of theories and ideas on why it could be a giant salamander. And just because of all the things that I've kind of put together, like if I had to guess anything for the Loch Ness monster, or for the Loch Ness monster, I would assume that it was a salamander. But there's also the mixed theories on things, considering that like what all the old reports from like 1595 or whatever year you were saying, the really early ones, they talk about this creature coming on land and eating sheep and eating different livestock and everything. So there is still the possibility of the whole like mixed idea that one, there may be giant salamanders in there that people were later on assuming was the Loch Ness monster, but there may have been something different a long time ago that originally started the stories and may have died off, or two, went back out to the ocean. Because that's also another theory, is that it could have been some type of a deep water creature that just happened to make its way into a lake and pretty much was there until it died. So, I mean, that's also definitely a possibility.
Yeah, for sure. So I've got kind of some more off the wall things to throw in, and then maybe we can round out this Loch Ness monster talk with the kind of our final thoughts and theories on the monster. Sound good?
Sounds good to me, man.
All right. So like we said, most people theorize that if this creature does exist, it might be some sort of prehistoric animal that somehow survived long after it's supposed to have gone extinct. But like I said, there is some more bizarre theories out there. And we talked about this one in our Jack Parsons episode, but that's been a while ago now. And so I think it's fitting to talk about it here. So the occultist and magician Aleister Crowley, which everybody knows that name that's listening to this show, he purchased a mansion on the shores of Loch Ness. And he supposedly performed like everything from black masses, to sex magic rituals at this mansion. And there's supposedly like a wide variety of paranormal and strange activity that went on because of these rituals. And just fun little fact that I always have to throw in here when I'm talking about this, Jimmy Page, the guitarist from Led Zeppelin, later purchased this mansion and they recorded in it. So that's kind of cool. But anyway, it's theorized that through these rituals and this sex magic and what have you, Crowley was able to open some sort of portal that allowed whatever the Loch Ness Monster is to enter our dimension or reality.
Calm down, Aleister Crowley. You did not summon Cthulhu. This thing had reports before you were there, and this guy's trying to take full credit saying, I did this with my sex magic. Like, no, you didn't. You did not. There's no Cthulhu. Just stop it. Sit down, Aleister.
Jack Parsons summoned the aliens, and Crowley summoned the Loch Ness Monster. That's what we figured out about sex magic.
It's not Cthulhu, it's Cthulhu. It's the younger sister, the smaller one.
But it's also been speculated that Loch Ness has like an unusually large deposit of quartz crystals at the bottom of it.
I'm going to let you finish. I have a theory on this now that you said that.
So, I mean, just kind of rounding that out, people have theorized, of course, that quartz crystals act as kind of an antenna and could be responsible for opening portals as well, which, if that's the case, that kind of makes sense to me, like we talked about with Bigfoot. If that's the case and this thing is coming through portals, it would explain, why no bodies have been found. It would also explain away like food supply issues because this thing is only in our reality for brief moments in time. But anyway.
I'm just going to throw this in here because I don't know if anybody else has suggested this before, but this is definitely a possibility now that you mentioned the quartz crystals. They talk about quartz crystals as being some type of like an energy retainer, right? So what if people are seeing a plesiosaur, but it's not there anymore? It's basically like residual from something existing there at one point because it's been stored in the quartz, but it's non-physical and it's not intelligent. It's just literally a replay of a different point in time.
That's kind of like people have the theory that Bigfoot could be like a ghost of something that used to exist. So that's kind of in the same vein as that, I
mean, that sounds... I mean, if you get into all that kind of woo-woo stuff, if you're looking at it from the woo-woo perspective, I feel like that is probably one of the best possible explanations on why people described a plesiosaurs, because it's just replaying something that used to be there at one point. Because at least... So obviously, like Scotland, that's more north. It's kind of laterally across by where Canada and north of like where Michigan would be. But I know Michigan at one point used to be a tropical shallow ocean, and they said that there was plesiosaurs and different things that existed there. So I mean, it would totally make sense that if maybe that would have shared somewhat of the same weather patterns, kind of like how it does now. With like Michigan, for example, maybe they were a tropical ocean at one point. I'll have to do some of my research into that. So it totally makes sense why there would be like reoccurring plesiosaurs, because there would have been some in that area if it was a shallow tropical ocean.
Yeah, no, that totally makes sense. So kind of rounding this out, just thoughts, theories, conclusions about Loch Ness. Most scientists and experts kind of think that the Loch Ness Monster is largely the result of like misidentification of natural phenomenon or outright hoaxes. There's the famous, it's referred to as the surgeon's photo. That's like the picture that everybody's seen of Loch Ness Monster. It's from 1934, and like the guy that did that on his deathbed came out and said it's a hoax. That's been proven to not be true.
Just to throw it out there for anybody that doesn't know, the guy supposedly paid a guy at a model shop to make that, and then he took the picture purposely on like a grainy camera. That was essentially what it was.
Yeah.
He purposely tried not to pick the best camera he had and had a little model and basically like zoomed in on it to make it look like it was a lot bigger. So
kind of where I land on Loch Ness, I think it's very possible there is something there. I think it's probably likely, like we were talking about on Bizarre Inquiries, talking about sea monsters and lake monsters and whatnot. If that is a salamander or a big fish or something more mundane than a plesiosaur, that's probably more likely. But yeah, I think a lot of these sightings are probably misidentification, but I do think there is probably something really big living in that lake. It's just a matter of what it is. So that's kind of where I fall on it.
Just to throw something else in there too. I mean, if it is a salamander and they come up to the top to get some food and then they dip back down, they would have a tail. So I feel like that could possibly be why people are seeing that long neck, or they think it's a long neck. So, I mean, if I had to guess anything at this point, I feel like the salamander thing is probably my most solid theory on it, the one I would probably stand behind. But just for the sake of it being a new concept, that why not? I mean, definitely like the whole idea behind it just being somewhat of like a ghost of it because of the quartz in the area. That sounds pretty viable if you're into
if we're
that
gonna
kind
go
of
woo
stuff.
woo, let's go woo woo.
Yeah, might as well. Fuck it.
Summoned by a devil wizard sex magic. I mean,
see, that's the weird thing though. Paranormal sounds woo woo, but at the same time, I feel like more people believe in the paranormal than they do in aliens or cryptids.
Yeah.
So it's like, it sounds crazy out there woo-woo, but at the same time, it's the one that it seems like most people believe in. So is it really that woo-woo and weird? Probably not.
Well, not to us, but we're weirdos. So.
That is true. But hey, some of the weirdos are the best people. So what can I say?
So we're going to kind of talk about a few other living dinosaurs here. And these I'm going to rattle through a little quicker. So we can't talk about dinosaurs without talking about dragons as well. You know, that's the other elephant in the room, kind of along with Loch Ness. But obviously, you know, this is going to be real shallow too. But, you know, tales of dragons date back, you know, centuries to earliest recorded human history. And they're from all over the place. You know, there's tales of dragons in Sumer, in Asia, in Mesoamerica. Basically, everybody has a legend of some sort of dragon or dinosaur-like creature. And there's even a biblical account from the book of Job. It's in chapter 41. And if you read this account, which I'm not going to do, you guys can check that out if you want to, but it describes a creature known as the Leviathan that if you read it, it sounds kind of like a dinosaur. So that's interesting. But arguably, you know, everybody knows about the dinosaur dragon type legends from Europe. And a lot of times people associate these with like knights and kings in the Middle Ages and whatnot. But there's still to this day or fairly recent times, a lot of European reports of dragon or dinosaur like creatures. In May of 1939, a French woman claimed that she encountered a quote, gigantic lizard while picking berries. And I included that just because of the berry picking thing.
I was going to say, it's always berries, man.
Yeah. And we talked about it in Missing 411. Like this berry picking motif pops up all the time with Bigfoot, missing persons, anything weird, fairy tale, not fairy tale, like stories of the fae.
Most delicious things have some type of defense. Apparently, berries' defense is that they throw you into another reality. That's their defense. That's why they're out in the open. They're everywhere for everybody, but don't mess with them because they'll throw you into another reality.
Yeah, so that one I pretty much only included because it talked about berry picking.
I want to throw a theory on dinosaur or dragons real quick too, as far as like Europe goes, with people having the sightings, and in Asia too. A lot of the legends talk about them living in caves, sometimes really high up on mountainsides and stuff. I mean, how often would you be able to scale up there to be able to check some of these places? I mean, there could definitely be a possibility of these things living up in high caves on mountains and stuff. And maybe they're out and about hunting during the day when people are, you know, up and actually climbing the mountains and stuff. And then during the night when everybody's already making base camp and not exploring the mountain is when these things could return home. So, I mean, just another kind of idea to throw in the possibility of there still being somewhat of a dinosaur / dragon. And I mean, even with the whole like dragon thing too, I mean, people think about dragons as the whole folklore concept, but it doesn't seem that ridiculous to me to have somewhat of like a flying reptile. Because, I mean, you think about what dinosaurs were, and they say that they eventually turned into birds. There's a very close relation between reptiles and birds. So it's like, just because there's not, there might actually be some discoveries of some flying lizards. I've seen a couple of them saying that they came from like the jungle and stuff, but I don't know how real they were. But it doesn't seem that far off to me for there to be some type of a reptile-like being that developed wings, considering how closely related birds and reptiles are.
Yeah, and a lot of these more recent sightings, and hell, even if you go back and look at a lot of like the medieval depictions of dragons, they're a lot smaller than we would think of like a dinosaur being, you know, so it makes perfect sense that these things are just slithering around, like you said, in mountains somewhere and, you know, have just evaded people for hundreds or thousands of years.
Two other things to throw in too. One, in a lot of dragon pictures, they're depicted as having feathers, especially like the Chinese dragons. So again, related to birds.
Even like the Mesoamerican ones, if I'm not mistaken.
Yep, that's what I was going to say. Like the
Quetzalcoatl or whatever his name
Quetzalcoatl.
is.
Yep.
Yeah, there you go.
And just to throw in another possible theory on it too, the normal fisherman story, that if somebody goes and they kill a dragon, they're going to tell the story and the dragon's going to be 100 feet tall, this, that. So it's like, if anybody kills anything like this, you got to take into consideration of the fisherman's tale. So these things were probably a lot smaller, maybe, you know, the same height as like a human, for example. But if that knight goes down and tells the entire city about what he just killed, he's going to tell them that it was 100 foot tall, you know?
Yeah. So actually, that's a perfect segue, kind of piggybacking off of those thoughts. In 1970, a man in, I believe it would be pronounced Forlì, Italy, claimed that he encountered a, quote, 15-foot, scaly, thick legged lizard that reminded him of a dinosaur. So again, like that's big, but it's not like Jurassic Park big, you know?
And you got to consider too that the knights theoretically may have said, I just killed a 20-foot dragon, only adding 5 feet. And then the next person tells the tale and they're like, did you hear about the Black Knight? He killed a 50-foot dragon. And then the next person's like, hey, the Black Knight's from our town and, you know, we're going to get invaded. Have you heard that this guy's killed a 100-foot dragon before?
Yeah, game of telephone again.
Yep.
But what I think is kind of cool about this account is this guy who saw this dinosaur dragon type creature claimed that it exhaled, heated breath. So that gets back to like, what could these tales and legends mean in real world terms? You know, maybe they're breathing fire is just game of telephone for they had heated breath, whatever that means.
I mean, there could have been a reenactment too, because I mean, you know how certain animals will use certain things in nature to do certain things? Maybe if this thing had something that was reacted with its breath or something, maybe it was able to blow fire with it. You know what I mean? Like maybe if there was like a sulfur buildup or something like that, and it like chewed on some of the sulfur, maybe it realized that it would like react with its breath and cause like flames or something like that. You know, like doesn't seem off for me for an animal in nature to discover something in nature that it can almost like use for itself. I mean, depending on also the intelligence level of it, but if you have a 15-foot lizard, I mean, think about Komodo dragons. They're pretty fucking smart for being a reptile. They'll learn how to corner people. They'll work as a pack. They'll do formations and stuff. So if you add an even bigger size to this thing and a little bit more intelligence, maybe it might discover that maybe if it takes a certain material that it's able to react with its breath in a different way and create some type of fire or something. I mean, just to throw in a possibility. Or again, it's the telephone thing that it had extremely hot breath and then 2 people tell the tale later and then it's blowing fire out of its mouth.
Well, and one other game of telephone possibility, if these are just, you know, basically really fucking big lizards, I mean, there could be some sort of like, you know, venom or acidic type saliva situation going on, and that got telephoned into breathing fire.
See, and just to throw in another possibility, with most dragon folklore, they talk about them having giant mounds of gold and this and that. You know, maybe the thing was collecting shiny objects, and some of those shiny objects would just react with it, not knowing that it was some type of like a chemical compound. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like maybe this thing was going around collecting shiny materials it found, and one of those shiny materials just happened to react with its breath and create fire. Who knows?
Yeah, definitely possible.
Or it happened one time, and then it just transferred to all the other tales, you know?
Yeah. Yeah. So kind of jumping to this side of the pond, I really like this story. This is one that I did not know about until doing the research for this episode, and I think this is a really cool story.
I just want to throw in one last theory before that for the dragon breath thing, because I'm fascinated by this at the moment. So if stuff started decomposing within its stomach, we don't know what its stomach may be like, right? So if it produces like methane gas within its stomach and it possibly releases it through its mouth, if there was a knight that was going to fight this thing, more than likely it was probably searching for it using a torch. So what if it never had that fire capability, but rather that it had like methane gas in its stomach, and when it like did the typical like creature towards it, it just it would catch the flame on people's torches and create fire.
Lighter to light your farts on fire?
Exactly like that. Like maybe it wasn't that it caused fire, it was just that most people that went after it were holding fire, and its stomach released something that reacted with the fire and just made it bigger, you know?
Yep. Dragon fire farts. You heard it here first.
Comes out of both ends, that methane gas.
All right, so I think you'll enjoy this one. So we are going to jump ahead in time to the year 1975 and the small town of Milton, Kentucky, because of course we're fucking going to Kentucky.
I love Kentucky
stuff. We're talking about something weird, so we got to talk about Kentucky. So we're going to be talking about the Milton lizard. And so this creature was first spotted in early July of 1975. And there were 2 brothers. Their name were Clarence and Garrett Cable. And they owned and operated a junkyard called Bluegrass Body Shop. And this body shop was located on kind of the north side of the town of Milton. It was off of a creek called Canip, C-A-N-I-P Creek. So Canip Creek. And this is a small creek off of the Ohio River. So we got Kentucky and the Ohio River.
Maybe also throw in, I know we haven't done an episode on it yet, but talking about Etidorpa, they apparently follow the Ohio River to find the weird location where the cavern entrance
there
is.
you
So
go.
another
Of
reference to the Ohio River.
Yep. So one day, Clarence was walking through the junkyard and he saw what he described as a man-sized reptile. And he saw this thing emerge from behind a pile of like wrecked cars. And according to Clarence, the creature had, quote, big eyes similar to a frog's. Beneath its mouth was an off-white color, and there are black and white stripes crossways of its body with quarter-size orange specks all over it. And so Clarence went on to say that this creature hissed at him several times, and then it like disappeared deeper into the junkyard. So a few weeks later, the other brother, Garrett, had an encounter with this creature of his own. So he was out, roaming around the junkyard one day, and he noticed an old pile of car hoods begin to move. And then he saw this creature's kind of head and shoulders emerge from underneath the pile. And so he ran to grab his brother and his rifle. Of course, we're in Kentucky. But when they returned to the spot, the creature was gone. But the next day, Clarence saw the lizard or a very similar one again. And why I say similar is this time he estimated the length of it to be approximately 15 feet, which is way bigger than they, noticed it being the first two times they saw this thing. So Clarence claimed that he threw a rock at the lizard and it hissed at him and then escaped into the nearby creek this time, which I think that's kind of interesting.
They just need to leave the damn lizard alone, man. They're throwing rocks at it and shit, and they're like, why is it so mean?
Why is it hissing at us?
Poke it with a stick. Why is it so aggravated?
Shortly after this, the brothers organized a search party to try to find this thing. But they never found any evidence of any of these lizards, and they were never seen again.
I wonder why.
Because you're throwing rocks and hissing at it. But Clarence said that the creature that he saw appeared to be similar to, but not exactly like, a monitor lizard. And he theorized that one of the cars in the junkyard possibly could have come from somewhere in like the western part of the United States, and it could have contained eggs that later hatched into these lizards. But that seems a little far-fetched to me. And also, monitor lizards are not known to grow anywhere near as big as what these guys were reporting. So also, this I thought was kind of interesting. In the July 3rd edition of a local newspaper, they published a photo of a large four-clawed footprint that was found in a tomato field. And the article that went along with this photo said that a dog had been attacked and, quote, aggressive sounds had been heard. So.
Hey, just to throw in another possibility on this one. So I wanted to looked up Komodo dragons and how big they can get. And of course, there could have been different species that have maybe existed at different times. So who knows for sure? Because the physical description is a bit different. But at least they say that the females usually get up to around 6 feet, and the males usually get up to about 10 feet in length. And they can weigh from 155 pounds to 300 pounds. So at least from the description that they said, I feel like the closest lizard to what they were describing could have been a Komodo dragon. Maybe somebody was, poaching eggs and illegally taking eggs or something like that, and maybe they did hatch. But the physical appearance is a bit different, but the size is a little bit closer than most other lizards for the description.
10 feet is definitely in, the gray area that this thing was 15 feet and it was 10, at the point you're seeing a lizard that big, that seems to be plausible to me.
That's kind of where I'm at with it. Like I said, just be, and also under fear, the physical descriptions can change because people can see something and it can look more, malevolent than they thought it was, just because it was that moment of fear real quick, and they're more so focusing on the size and not maybe all the physical features. So maybe they added some of the physical features in their head just because of being under a high stress fear moment, but they still describe the size as like a Komodo dragon. And I mean, I don't know when Komodo dragons were fully like discovered where people started like importing and exporting them and stuff, but I mean, definitely a possibility.
Well, in just a second, we're going to talk about when they were discovered. I don't know about importing and exporting, but kind of just running through some other kind of American modern day dragons really quick. In 1934, a farmer in South Dakota claimed that his tractor was run off the road by what he called a dragon. And after this thing ran across the road in front of him, it disappeared into a nearby lake. So like the previous story, here's these things just kind of running towards water. And he claimed, this farmer did, that several weeks before this encounter, his livestock started going missing. So, that's kind of a cryptozoology trope as well. Once the livestock starts going missing, something weird's around.
Mm-hmm. And especially depending on the livestock, too, and the size of it can kind of give you an idea, too.
Yeah. Yeah. So
chickens go missing, you don't think much about it, but if you start having cows go missing and shit, then something big's coming.
So running through the rest of these real quick, in southern Colorado and southwestern Texas, there are reports of large upright lizards that are referred to as river dinos and mountain boomers, respectively.
Those damn boomers.
Yeah. Okay, boomer. So kind of these accounts of these things are questionable at best, but their descriptions are really consistent to one another. Allegedly, they resemble two-legged theropod-type dinosaurs, and they're often seen near riverbeds. They're said to stand anywhere from 3 to 5 feet tall, and they have green or grayish skin with long necks and small snake-like heads. They're also said to have powerful hind legs, small arms, and long tails. So basically, they're just like little bitty T-Rex looking dinosaurs is pretty much what these things are reported as looking like.
It's a sleelac, or what are they called? Sleestacks or whatever, the things from Land of the Lost?
It's something like that, yeah. And just rounding us out here before we kind of start concluding the episode, there to this day, throughout history, have been numerous reports of flying dinosaur-type creatures that resemble pterodactyls, like all over the United States, particularly in the Southwest.
The Van Meter Visitor being one of them, because I know we haven't done an episode on that one yet, but here's a reference for it at least. The Van Meter Visitor is another great example for anybody that's familiar with that name.
Yeah, so kind of that's all I got for the research. Kind of thoughts and conclusions. I think it's totally possible that some species of dinosaurs or ancient creatures survived way long after they supposedly went extinct. This would, explain the worldwide legends of dragons and also these modern day living dinosaurs. Like we were talking about just a moment ago, the Komodo dragon, which, like you said, the largest known species of living lizard, it wasn't even discovered by Western scientists until 1910. And if you look at a picture of a Komodo dragon or especially a monitor lizard, they look just like dinosaurs,
I think the Komodo dragons weren't actually discovered until then, because they started coming over to the other shore because they live on Komodo Island and they supposedly basically killed off everything else that existed on the island. So they started coming over to the mainland in order to collect food. So that was probably the only reason they were actually discovered.
Yeah, and we're discovering or rediscovering new shit all the time. I'm sure a lot of our listeners know about the coelacanth, which is like this ancient species of fish that supposedly went extinct millions of years ago. But in 1938, they found a specimen of this fish off the coast of South Africa.
Wasn't it Japanese fishermen or something? I remember there being the Japanese ones discovered or something.
That. And if you really get down to it, crocodiles and turtles and stuff like that, they've been around for millions and millions of years. Those are basically dinosaurs as well. So
I just think they got smaller, which seems to fit with a lot of the giant lake monster things, is that they could just be a smaller version of something that existed in the past because it needed to fit and adapt to the environment.
Yeah, so we've got living dinosaurs. We've got rediscovered ancient species. So
technically birds are too, right?
Yeah.
That's another one to throw in.
It's not far-fetched for me to think there's these small pockets of even more what we would associate as dinosaurs living out there. So that's basically all I got.
Especially in super duper isolated jungles. And going back to, again, the bizarre inquiries we talked about last week, the damn ocean and how much of it we haven't discovered. Theoretically, if there was the meteorite that killed off most of the dinosaurs on the planet, which ones would have been the ones that lived? It would have been the ones in the water. So, that just goes back into that theory. Yep. The ones you can't get to, that there could be a ridiculous amount of these things existing on the bottom of the ocean, and they wouldn't have a reason to come up top because maybe there's other bigger shit that they eat at the bottom, or if they've been existing down there for so long, they've adapted to that pressure and they can't come up because it'll kill them.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I think all good thoughts. This, like you said, kind of piggybacks a lot off of the bizarre inquiries we did last week. It was totally unplanned. This is just one of those things. It's kind of funny.
It always works that way.
Since I've been on the show, we have not talked about lake monsters at all. And now, like, 3 out of the last 4 episodes, we've done some sort of lake monster. We did Normie, we did the Thydus lake monster. We did this episode, and we did the bizarre inquiry. So
totally unplanned with each other, too.
Yeah, weird synchronicities. This is how it worked out. So.
And the other good news is, too, I haven't heard anybody else really covering lake monsters recently, so at least we're kind of doing our own little accidental pocket over here.
Yeah, so hopefully all the listeners enjoyed this. This was an interesting one to kind of research, a little more grounded than some of the stuff we talk about. So, yeah, that's all I got on this one.
So before we hop into the back of the house stuff, I forgot to mention at the beginning of the show, but I feel like the people that are still around listening at the very tail of the show are probably the reason why this has happened. But Bizarre Encounters has now reached 5% globally ranked. So I wanted to throw out a big thank you to all of you guys that have supported the show, all the people that became regular listeners. And we wouldn't have been able to do it without you guys. And we're going to keep hopefully climbing and making it so we can keep expanding the show even more. But again, big thank you to you guys, because without you guys, we wouldn't have been able to make the show hit the top 5% globally ranked. And if anybody thinks that we deserve a review or rating for the show, we would definitely appreciate it. That'll keep helping us boost up to make it so that, again, more people are able to discover the show and we can keep expanding the community. If you guys leave a 5-star review on iTunes, we will read it on the show and, of course, give you guys a big shout out. But if you know anybody that would enjoy this particular episode or the show as a whole, you guys can always share it through word of mouth. Organically is the best way for the show to grow. And we need somewhat of a street team out there. So we appreciate you guys for boosting up and sharing the show.
And you guys know the drill. Contact us through email, social media, the submission forms, all that good stuff. Y'all know how the internet works. Just get up with us somehow. You guys can share fan art, have a conversation with us, be a guest, have us as a guest on your show, like our buddy Ryley just did, or even sponsor the show if you guys want to. So, yeah, just get up with us somehow.
And every single thing that we mentioned throughout the show is all available in the link tree, which is available down in the show description. I've been the one that they call Shayn Squatch.
And I've been the one and only Big Bad Boo Daddy.
Boo Daddy! And guys, just like us, it's okay to stay bizarre. So guys, always remember to stay bizarre. Bizarre. Bizarre.
They're lighting dragon farts on fire?